to the Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty Gensius, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and host for Circular Firing Squad. We have 5 members, 5 questions, and 5 answers for each question. Each squad member generates a question that we all have to answer, ranging from the pastoral to the pathetic. Let's see who we have with us on tonight's episode.
Hi, everybody. Elliott Ingersoll here from Cleveland State University and host of Apply Topically.
Hey, everyone. My name is Mitch Conrad. I am a third-year clinical mental health counseling student at Cleveland State University and counselor trainee at Baldwin-Wallace University.
Hi, everyone. It's Elvis here, English teacher, currently working in a rural school in Bolivia, in South America, and alumni from Kent State University. It's nice to meet you all.
Hi, it's Steph Murder, a doctoral candidate at Kent State University, a little closer every day, and practicing clinical counselor.
All right, so we have a good crew here tonight. Elliott, you've got the first question.
Okay. If your counseling program were a musical instrument, what would it be and why?
So I guess I'm up first on this, and it's interesting because I'm trying to frame it in like the whole is it the whole counseling program, like including the faculty and the students? Is it just maybe the faculty? Is it just the department? I'm just gonna go with the easiest answer that I can think of, which is right behind me, which is a piano. And I think the thing that I've been most happy about in our program at CSU is that there's people from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds and all different kinds of representations, and all different kinds of people have their own interests. And the thing about that kind of came to my mind is something like our internship classes. And so I'm in internship class right now, and we've got 12 students in this class. Now, 12 is a little bit more than 10, but some people have 6 fingers. On a piano, right, you get a chance to play sometimes, right, like 10 different notes at once. And this is different than other instruments, right? And so I played trumpet when I was younger, and it's like, well, I can play 1 note on the trumpet at a time. And I can play 10 notes on the keyboard at a time. Sometimes you can even play more than 10 notes on a keyboard or piano at a time. Don't even necessarily need 6 fingers for that. And I've always thought like that, in something like an internship class, we've got a lot of different opinions. We've got a lot of different voices. We've got a lot of different tones, if you will. We've got a lot of different, ways that people are able to express themselves about what's going on inside of their internship or their world. And I find that this is generally how our program tends to operate in the classes that I've most enjoyed, where students are able to provide different perspectives, and professors are able to provide different perspectives in a collaborative way that increases, I think, just like the general knowledge and the general experience to be more fulfilling. And so I go with something like a piano just because the way that our program feels to me as a student is that there's a lot of people able to play and sort of like share their note, whatever it is, or their opinion, or their perspective, or their experience at once.
Well, that was a hard one. I don't have a program, but I can relate the question to the English classes that I have daily at school. I could say I will take the drums, because you need to pay attention to lots of things, even though most people can say that learning English or a foreign language, it's kind of easy. It depends on how much practice you put on it. And playing the drums takes a lot of concentration. You have to make a spot for it so you can practice in a comfy way. And so is learning English in my case. And I always tell my students to set apart and make their own environment so they can have songs in English, movies in English. Even if they change their language of their phones in English, that's really a good thing. So I really appreciate when my students do those kind of things. So it makes sense when they are trying to practice and doing their effort very apart from school, because just for you to know, I only have one class per week with my students, with like around 10 or 11 groups per week. So it's kind of hard to make progress only in classrooms. So I need to set apart a lot of activities they can do at home, so they can create their own environment. So from one side, I have their own practice. On the other side is my tutoring that I give in face-to-face sessions. So that's pretty much to playing the drums, because you have to pay attention to a lot of things, right? You are playing with your feet. You are using both hands. You are looking to a lot of sides. So I can say the drums is very similar to teaching English in my situation.
I love that answer. Um, and yes, this is a difficult question. It sounded easy at first, and then it required some thought. So, as usual, I was going back and forth between two different answers, but I guess I'm going to just go with a guitar. And because there's different kinds of guitars, you have acoustic, you have electric, and when people are playing the guitar, it can sound very different. And really, what I mean by all of that is that as a student going through the program, that's, from my perspective, it was like different types of guitar perhaps throughout the program. And, maybe more electric in the beginning and then more acoustic as you continued on. And then it was just a jam session that never ended. But, different types, but it was the same instrument, but it was just different sounds and different types throughout as I experienced it.
Steph and I aren't thinking too differently. However, mine is a guitar too, but it's a 6-string guitar with only 4 strings. And because I think our department is a pretty good instrument, but we've had some changes in terms of faculty. So right now we have a few senior faculty that have been with the program for a long time. And we have the rest of the faculty who have been with the program less than 3 years. So you have this vast difference in experience and time served within the program. And that's because we had a full group of faculty, and they have slowly they pretty much retired over a 5-year cluster. We also had a death, and we had some other things that moved people out. So there's this, but we all stayed together for many, many years. So there's this big gap of sort of middle-ranged faculty or mid-ranged faculty that we don't have in our program. So to me, that's kind of the missing strings. And when when the rest of us kind of time out, there's still going to be that gap in the middle, which can really strengthen the program and make the guitar sound kind of full with its sound. And so eventually all of that will roll through and we'll be fine. But right now it feels like a 6-string guitar with 4 strings.
These are great answers. My first thought was of a pipe organ based on my time in the Anglican Episcopal Church. I was in St. John's, Youngstown, Ohio, and they had an amazing pipe organ. And the person who played it, he looked like a man possessed with his arms flailing and his legs. And he was directing the choir too. Amazing. But our program's not as big and bombastic and officious as that. So I settled on a foot pedal harmonium. And it's a 19th century instrument that's kind of in the accordion family. You blow air through the reeds with 2 foot pedals that you have to alternately hit. So you got both feet going. And then you can play the keyboard with your hands, but it has a warm, intimate sound. So lots of moving parts, very complex, but warm and intimate. That's why I chose the 2-pedal harmonium.
Leave it to Elliott to pick an instrument from the 19th century for us to just reminisce back when we were using that instrument. Mitch, I think you're up next.
When we were kids, right?
I'm really curious now too about like what all the other professors in our department would say for this question too. But maybe I'll be asking this week. My question is, what do you see as the benefits and the limitations of mental health diagnoses?
Well, that's really a big issue in terms of dealing with people's mental health. I think the benefits is that you can have already a background of how you are feeling in the moment of making the diagnosis, and the limitation is, or on the other hand, you have the patient or the student maybe that can use this kind of diagnosis to avoid a lot of things. So what I can relate this to many experiences that I have had as a student and also as a teacher. As a student, I used to have classmates who consider themselves, like having mental health issues. So they use that as an excuse for skipping a lot of activities that we were supposed to have a compulsory. So they used to do that. That was very bad. But we just had to observe and look, doing nothing. On the other hand, we have these situations in which students are really having mental issues, and somehow their parents are not taking attention into it. Well, they are just having a lot of struggle in classes. So that's really an issue in my school. So sometimes it will depend on the counselor, on the psychologist, and handle this information very carefully, because it can be very beneficial. But at the same time, if we put this in a very easy way, students or the patient can use it on their own benefits.
All right. Well, thanks for giving such an easy question, Mitch. Right. So I mean, I think benefits might be the common language, being able to discuss things, to have a way to conceptualize the presentation of symptoms, maybe across professions, and to be able to communicate that with our clients. I think there can be several barriers easily, off the top of my head, like stigma and people getting too concerned with that. But then what I find often-ish is that clients get too so focused on finding the right diagnosis. And it's like every time it's like, but it could be this and this. And at a certain point, it's like, it doesn't matter. Let's work on the parts that are interfering in your life, because it's maybe similar to what Elvis was saying, that it's a way to avoid doing the work. If you just think that like just the next thing, and because it's not going to all clunk into place no matter what. Diagnosis can be helpful with making things make sense for clients as well. It can be like, oh, okay, well, that's why I was like that. That makes sense. And that's a big relief, and that can be very helpful. But if they get too wrapped up into, thinking they need to turn every stone to find every little bit in there, instead of just kind of getting started at a certain point, it feels counterproductive.
Thanks, Steph, for handling everybody else's answers. I've got nothing to say after that. We went through this phase where diagnosis was cool. Everybody did it. No big deal. And then there were concerns raised about the stigma that it leaves with clients, or the potential stigma that a diagnosis leaves. I like diagnosis. I like it because it helps me conceptualize the potential things that I might need to do with treatment. It doesn't mean that all diagnoses for me are really clean and clear, but it does keep a set of stuff in my head that I need to be constantly aware of if I'm working with this particular client. So I see some limitations. I see more advantages, but mainly from my conceptualization of clients, not from the stuff that I would put down on paper.
Some of you might remember a while back, we were talking about a similar topic about diagnoses. My problem is we may be labeling people with something that is a fiction. In one of our recent shows, someone asked about if people were basically good, and I came out, yeah, I thought so, and I think the good outweighs the bad in humanity. Not so with diagnosis. Diagnosis is like Zoroastrianism. The good and the evil are equally balanced, and the twain shall never meet until we figure out the etiology for these darn disorders. And also, it depends on the manual that one uses. I prefer the International Classification of Disease, Behavioral, and Mental Health Diagnoses number 10 to the DSM-5 TR. But you also got the DCO-5 for children ages 0 to 3. You got the Psychodynamic Diagnostic Manual. So I think we need to teach it with more caution. I tell my students the DSM is like a handgun. You can do a lot of damage with it, or you can shoot it for sport, use it for protection. But I think we need to look at it at that level, and then it can become useful. As Steph said, it can provide a common language, but only when that language is held lightly. Now, see, that's the trick right there. I know a lot of people who they propound the announcement that's a diagnosis like it was some ontological fact. But I think we got to hold them lightly. And I teach the students a way to do it so that the way they collect the intake narrative gives them a clue as to which theory of etiology for the disorder to follow. There's like 10 theories of etiology for major depressive disorder, but the narrative, the client narrative, will tell you which of those you're going to weave into your treatment. So as long as we make that clear, it can be okay, but we must be mindful and cautious. Said the least mindful, least cautious person ever on the planet. But
appreciate everybody's answers. Thanks, y'all. Diagnosis to me has been something that has been more put into focus as I've gotten into clinical work. I've noticed that I have quite the aversion to it. It starts with that idea of etiology, right? Where does this diagnosis come from? There are certain disorders like post-traumatic stress disorder, and I use quotes because trauma, from my perspective, can't be considered a disorder. That wouldn't make too much sense to me to pathologize someone's reaction to something like sexual assault or assault as disordered. And yet there are many other disorders or criteria or diagnoses inside the DSM without a clear etiology. And so therefore we're sort of, in a way, it feels like we're tossing darts a little blindfolded out here, especially when I looked inside the research and noticed about some of the misdiagnosis rates. And so OCD, for instance, is generally misdiagnosed inside the research literature, and there's not too much about it, but about 40% to 50%. Extremely high, right? Because the question to me isn't what is an acceptable misdiagnosis rate or missed diagnosis rate. From a counselor's point of view, I'm thinking about going in as a client and what are the chances that I'm going to receive an accurate diagnosis? Diagnosis, too, is more inaccurately prescribed by physicians and doctors who are sometimes able to provide those diagnoses for medication purposes. Sometimes that even like those are even higher than mental health professionals. And so I think the question for me has become, what is it really doing, especially with expedited diagnosis, where diagnosis is done in 15 minutes or 60 minutes, right? I've heard, especially from students in my program and also from clients who I've seen and just from people in general about how quickly they receive a diagnosis. Can you accurately diagnose a personality disorder in 15 minutes or 60 minutes or 90 minutes or 120 minutes? Can you accurately diagnose schizophrenia? Can you accurately diagnose bipolar? Can you accurately diagnose OCD, especially when there's stuff like that might be better explained, as far as I'm concerned, by traumatic experiences that people have had and may have been left unaddressed. And some of the pathologizing ways that we treat emotional, basically just emotions in general, and also sensory experience, different sensory experiences in general, I think can lead to really pathologizing, human experience. I think of it in the same, in one way, of individuals who may be experiencing some sensory concerns and maybe putting them on medication and maybe providing them for a diagnosis. That at the end of the day, what does pathologizing it do if they don't ever experience symptom relief? What does humanizing things do a little? Does humanizing these things, does humanizing these emotional and sensory experiences and allowing people a place to process what's going on without pathology, is that actually going to give people more benefit when a counselor can sit with them and affirm that, their experience is, it's acceptable, but I also understand, it sounds like it's not very fun. It sounds like it's not enjoyable. It sounds like it sucks. It sounds like it's terrible. Affirming and humanizing some of these experiences, even when they're really challenging or when they feel oppressive, and empathizing with, as opposed to judging with pathology, because from my perspective, judgment and empathy tend to be polar opposites. I've just wondered, especially lately, like even like how to continue to engage with the practice, because it just doesn't seem to me that, there are some benefits like shared language, but I've noticed even in terms of like how people express having their diagnosis, right? There's a large difference between I'm diagnosed with major depressive disorder versus I have major depressive disorder. That those two things can be very different feelings and experiences in terms of, right, like what someone is diagnosed with and when it's sort of like in a non-pathological way, if that's possible, versus when someone really starts to identify, especially over time when people have major depressive disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder for 10 or 20 years, when does someone really get so immersed in the having of something that it becomes a problem for them? Just kind of like an interesting, I don't want to say interesting, but something that I'm concerned about in the field is how do we humanize this a little bit more?
Next question goes to Elvis.
All right. So the question is there something that, and with something I mean anything that you would imagine. So is there something that would make your life easier, but it's socially not accepted?
So I had an answer. Well, my first answer is that I would say it, but it's not socially accepted. So I was scared to put it out there. But that was. But do you mean like it just imagining, like just hypothetically?
Yeah, it could be also physical. So whatever comes to mind.
Hypothetically, I 100% want like a very protective but soundproof bubble for my daughters, and she can stay in there and actually still be entertained for at least 15 minutes at a time. And I think many people would find that wrong. But that would make my life incredible, like just much easier. Just somewhere where I could stick her. She'd be safe, entertained, but quiet, at least to my ears. I could get something done.
I had trouble with this question. Coming up with anything I felt that would be socially not accepted, that would make my life easier. I mean, I had a hard time wrestling with the questions. I've got a pretty great life, so I don't know what I need to substitute to make it better. More money. I don't know. I came up blank with this. So I am going to pass it on to Elliott.
Unlike Marty, Elvis, as soon as I read the question, I thought of something from your neck of the woods, as the saying goes, legal coca leaves. Boy, would that make my life a lot easier. I've been, just dealing with long COVID stuff and like trying to find different types of stimulants. Coca leaves, before you turn them into cocaine, if you mix them with a nice alkaline substance, you get a very mellow energy burst, which is something I would absolutely love to have access to legally. And that would make my life easier.
Yeah, this one's really, really challenging for me because there's some things that like feel like more like lighter and some things that feel a little bit more serious. And so I think one of the things that would certainly make my life easier, but there's definitely, it feels a bit socially taboo in certain circles to talk about. At least that's what I've generally been experiencing, but I think people are opening up to it more, right? Like, I'm sure people who've listened before are aware that I'm interested in providing psychedelic-assisted therapy. And this isn't something that a lot of people are aware of, that is even something that's like, hey, it's like happening in the state of Ohio, and that people can, right, like even like right now, like receive like ketamine therapy, whether it be ketamine assisted therapy or at home ketamine therapy, and someone could potentially do that with integration as well. And, it being such an interest of mine and something that I'm interested to see how the field of counseling is interested in either integrating it into the field of counseling or not. I've wondered, especially because in states like Oregon and now in states like Colorado, where things like psilocybin have been legalized for therapeutic use, there's a large contingent of, for instance, like military veterans in Colorado who really pushed hard for psilocybin-assisted and psilocybin therapies in general. But that psychedelic-assisted therapy is something that, I've been wondering how to, I suppose, like have more conversations with people about, because it seems like there's not a lot of awareness, and that a lot of people like me, right, like grew up in the DARE era, were convinced for a very long time that this stuff is toxic, this stuff is, has no therapeutic benefit, no medical benefit, this is Schedule 1 for a reason. And then now that we're seeing all this research about it come out and seeing it be legalized in different states, and how that's allowing especially people like veterans who didn't necessarily have access or don't necessarily have access or haven't received the benefits from something like, from typical therapy modalities that they've deserved, that this is now something that's like here. And, for example, in the state of Ohio, ketamine's been available for a while. It's just not widespread yet, and it's not being provided from my perspective in a way that could be considered more affirming and therapeutic, right? Like, what does ketamine-assisted psychotherapy look like versus what does at-home ketamine therapy look like? Are there differences in effectiveness rates? And so for me, I know that it would certainly make my life a lot, I don't know if it would make it easier. It would certainly feel easier, but it would certainly make it more enjoyable to me. Like I always appreciate and I'm grateful for any time that I meet someone or am able to have a conversation about psychedelics and the therapeutic benefits of them and the potential benefits that increased legalization could bring to the mental health care field, and just like even the people's lives in general, right? Someone doesn't have to receive assisted psychotherapy to receive benefit from a psychedelic, nor does anyone have to use this stuff, right? It's always importantly like up to the individual. Is this something that they consider that can be therapeutic for them or not? And what does that look like for them, right? Like I always worry about prescriptions and direction and suggestion and stuff like that. So that for me, I think would be a pretty big deal.
Great. Thanks for your advice.
Elvis, you asked the question. Now you've got to tell us your magical answer.
Well, I've been thinking about something that can be kind of annoying for everybody, like some earphones that I can use so I can mute anybody who's been annoying at a time, or I can hear some thoughts over there. So what people are thinking about me from time to time. I think it has to do a lot of with privacy thing and that stuff, but I think I can use that information for a good thing. And also for muting annoying noises like children over there. So I have been having like some experiences with noisy children. So that is really annoying sometimes. Even if you are in a good mood, sometimes your mood can go really down when you have these kind of situations. I was also thinking about something that is kind of real for English teachers here. Using the dictionary is kind of socially not accepted because we have this stigma that English teachers are supposed to know like the whole vocabulary thing and all the words in English. So when you as teacher take a dictionary out of your pocket, I mean your phone, because many years ago it was like dictionary, the whole thing, and your students are looking like, what? You don't know the word? So that will make our lives as teachers much easier. So talking about the coca lips, Elliott, it's very legal here in Bolivia. It's really usual thing that we do. It's not banned. So whenever you feel sick, you can just have a coca tea, or you can just chew some coca leaves and suck it and put it here on the side of your chin. And it's completely normal. So you can do it if you come here.
So we're going to have like the first on the road show in Bolivia. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. So what my question is there something that you really just thought was wonderful in high school or undergrad and you still miss it today?
I started to think about this, and I had to think back many years to get to high school and even my undergrad years. And the thing that I think was really wonderful was we had very little technology. And what I mean by that is if I could have that now, that would be great. You worked in an office. If you commuted home, I had to commute back home. And it was a 30-minute commute and there was no cell phone. There was no way to contact me between the office and home. I could have that peace and quiet drive all the way home, and not be interrupted with work or be interrupted with home. We didn't have smartphones, so there was no way to connect. And now, of course, we have smartphones. People started using them in the cars, and then they said, you can't use them in the cars, so we're going to give you a ticket if we catch you using them in the cars. And then people have them hooked up to their audio system so they can drive hands-free, they can be hands-free and still talk on the phone. So what I miss is the opportunity to have pockets of isolation away from technology. And you could say, well, you can do that, just shut it off and go away. But that doesn't stop the rest of the world that's still operating on this expectation that you are always connected, you are always available, and there is an immediacy in the technology or the communication process now that there wasn't back during it. Well, it didn't exist back in my high school and back in my college days. And before I sound like an old man shouting at clouds, I'm going to turn it over to Elliott.
I think, like you said, Marty, I'm very grateful for my life. It's a wonderful life. I miss being irresponsible. Now, some people may take issue and say, well, you've never really stopped. Bring my partner in on that one. But I would say, yeah, I've definitely picked up responsibilities. I've tried to meet them. But I miss the days where I was only answering, to myself, whoever was employing me or whatever my academic aspirations were. That's the only thing I miss. I think everything else I've either kept in touch with or I got tired of it and I let go of it. So, but feeling a little more carefree. So, I think that's one of the things death brings. And, it's not all bad. So I'll be looking forward to that part of it if there's anything on the other side of it. Of course, you might end up with more responsibility in some weird afterlife. Who knows? Wouldn't that be something? They just hand you a bunch of tax forms and like 8 cell phones and say, keep available.
I wasn't sure that I needed the existential dread of that tonight, but here we are. I remember, especially from like undergrad, I think the big thing that stuck out for me was the sense of community, the sense of connectivity in that part of life, especially because technology has in some ways moved us further apart, is something that I miss in the way that like I remember like being in college and like being there and like having a job as a resident assistant definitely like spoils this a little bit because I always felt like I was like working even when I wasn't actually like working. But the thing that I enjoyed about it was that Monday through Friday, I could, I'd be in classes and I would always be seeing people and always being, and always having conversations with people. And then on the weekends, I would not have classes, but I would typically be doing the same thing. I'd be going and visiting friends and spending time with friends. And that this was something that in my life was very consistent in terms of like interaction with people. And I don't know how it got to the point for me where I missed that so much, where I'm like, I don't really interact with people as much on the weekends. Like sometimes I'll like, because there's days where it's like, oh, I really don't like see anybody or like, talk as much with people. Like maybe I'll talk to somebody on the phone or whatnot, but I won't necessarily be going out and doing some things. And so I try to incorporate that as much as like reincorporate that as much in my life as I can, even like not living on a college campus. But it's something that I do sincerely miss about high school and college days is I felt much more connected. And now I still like, I feel more connected now, but there was a time in my life where it was like, oh gosh, like I really don't feel like too connected to people at all because of that like structured, almost like that structured like socialization. And the socialization part is there's a question there, but the structured like social activities and connections with people that made it more easy to kind of like experience life in a different way. So I miss that.
So for this question, I would like to share a quote of Andy Bernard, the character from The Office series. I'm sure you have. So he says, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good days before you've actually left them. So with this, I want to relate my school days in high school, whenever comes the question, like which was the stage of your life that you enjoy the most, I always reply the school days because I didn't have any responsibilities, being an adult kind of sucks nowadays. So I had a very surrounding in my school, a very nice friends that I have it now, but now as adults it's very different. Most of them are already married, so it's really hard to hang out or go out. So yeah, I would say school days and being, as Elliot said, irresponsible. You don't have any duties to do. The only task you do is do your homework okay, or at least got the 50-100% plus one, and that's it. And then you can enjoy life, like music. The part of technology is also added to this because whichever stupid thing that we would do in those days was not even recorded. It's in the past, in the memory of my friends. But now, whichever thing you do is in some phone around your environment. So that kind of sucks too. So yeah, I miss those days from high school.
Oh, I am grateful that camera phones and social media did not exist when I was in undergrad. That's a very good point. I think my answer kind of takes from what everybody was saying, and where you could just focus on you, and there were opportunities to explore things that were interesting to you that had no bearing on your life whatsoever. You just thought they were interesting, and you had time to think and reflect. Marty, it's funny that you were saying the drive with no phone, because that's kind of what I looked forward to the most when I would drive from Cleveland to New Hampshire. I was like, I'm in my car and nobody can get to me, and I am as off the grid as I'll probably ever be. And it was just me and my music, and that was something that was, that I looked forward to, and that was special to me at that time. And you're right, now it's not the same. It's just not the same. But I do miss just being able to kind of live your life without those responsibilities. Man, we are all a bunch of adults wishing, the responsibilities give us some good stuff in our lives, pretty much. But money, and even relationships where if we have them, like, we're probably okay with them. We want them, but they are responsibilities. Nonetheless, you have to take other people into consideration when you make decisions sometimes. And it's like, oh man, I can't just get up and go. But that's okay too, because you get the good stuff on the other end. I'm not complaining, I'm just comparing. Anyway, I don't remember exactly where I was when I thought of this question, but that is my answer today.
Okay. I'm going to ask one last question for the group, and then we'll get to a final shot question. But my question is, this week I'm getting these regular reminders from a publisher. I'm doing a couple of encyclopedia pieces, and the publisher it's not the publisher, it's the editor, has been reminding me that the pieces are due 2 weeks from now. And, a week ago it was 3 weeks from now. And God bless them. I'm glad they're doing that, because it's at least a weekly reminder that I've got this stuff to do. So my question is a little self-serving. How do you manage the time you take for your scholarship work, whatever that is for you?
I don't think I manage it terribly well. Oh, I have to binge. So I need at least 3 hours, preferably 5 hours. And that's how I work. And then I'll dive in, and that gives me time to go down rabbit holes. And 50% of the rabbit holes will help me revise an idea or a thought. But I require large blocks of it to really be effective. And I also prefer working with other writers when I can. That is always enlivening for me. So if there's someone I want to do the project with, and then I have to block out large amounts of time, that's about the only way I've ever gotten it done.
Done a whole lot of, I suppose, like scholarship work yet. However, when I have done it, and there is some that I'm doing now, I think that the most effective sort of like headspace for me is when I know that I'm emotionally motivated to do it. And that it's sometimes hard to motivation is always interesting because I don't really necessarily like find motivation or like create motivation, but there's typically things that like will come up in my life that'll remind me about some of the stuff that I'm interested in, or the stuff that I'm studying, or the stuff that I'm writing about, or the stuff that I'm interested in, reading about more. And that when I have those like emotions behind it, that those emotions can be really strong motivators for me. And that's the time I think when I'm able to produce. I don't like to say the word produce, that makes it sound too technical, but where I'm able to like be passionate about what I'm either writing about or reading about or studying or researching, and that those are the times where it feels like I'm most effective. Sometimes the challenge with that, of course, is that like there's times where it's like I feel like I should be doing it, but I'm not. And so I try to capitalize. And so in that way, I've tried to notice those like more like heightened emotional states more when I feel, I don't want to say compelled, but when I feel really like that motivation sense to really engage with that type of work.
Well, talking about the scholarships, I feel both sides. Being a student, part of a scholarship, which I guess is much easier because when I have been part of a scholarship, they have all done and scheduled. I'm very grateful for that. And the only thing I do is just do my best to attach to the schedules and that stuff. On the other hand, I have myself building a program or a scholarship. So I would say I haven't done that yet. I'm sure I'm going to do that kind of work someday. So I guess I would just take like 2 or 3 hours, just like Elliott, before I plan to do something or build the program, so I can do it step by step. Like I don't know, like 1 month or 2 months before I release the program, so I can have it all arranged.
Similarly, I really try to overestimate how much time a task will take. I had the complete opposite problem growing up, and I've learned from my mistakes. When I was younger, I thought, oh, I'll just knock that out. Or this 10-page paper, I can write that in an hour and a half. Sure. I don't know why I thought I could do that, but in my brain, it made sense. I have since learned that that is not reality. And what has really helped me is overestimating. So, not even the time I think it would need. And then I add days, weeks, months, depending on the project and what needs to get done. Because I also have to add extra time in, because you never know when life is going to happen, and you can't plan it down expecting not to get sick or some emergency to arise, little emergencies. So I think making sure that I overestimate when I can, and even in those little pockets of time, if I'm getting crunched down, to still reserve more time than I would hope is necessary to complete the work.
Well, I am tired. I am terrible at this in terms of managing time for scholarship, because so many other things get in the way. And if it's work, what happens is I wind up working on other projects and keep pushing the scholarship down kicking the can down the road. But eventually have to get to it, and I get to it. If I'd like to work with co-authors, I'm not opposed to doing single author stuff, but I have to have a co-author who realizes that's part of my process. And I wind up feeling guilty in the process, and then that causes more issues for me in terms of it. But it's sort of one of those things, hey, let's knock this thing off this weekend. And so that, when I say this weekend, that means Saturday night and then all day Sunday. So It's how I work. It's and unfortunately I've gotten better at it because the editing tools are out there that makes that job a lot easier to do in a shorter period of time. So I never learn, and that's how I compress stuff out and get the stuff out. At the same time, remain relatively prolific with the work that I've done. So I'm not slacking. It's just that's my work process. And I apologize and pity the people who co-author with me, and they get it. I think they eventually get it, and they know that's how I work. And then when I look back on it, I look back at the work that I've done. I'm like, this is really pretty cool. I mean, I don't like to write stuff that all is about stuff that's already been written about. I like to add things into it. So that's where my creative piece comes out. So I get into a method once I get into the method, but I wind up procrastinating for a long period of time to finally get into the method. So we got one final question, which is the final shot question, and everybody's here on screen. The question is Teams or Zoom?
Well, I'm going to give you an answer that's ontological, theological, and technological. Teams is the devil's work. Zoom all the way. Zoom only. If I could do away with Teams and urinate on it in a bag and then chuck it into the garbage, I would do that in a heartbeat. Of course, not everyone may feel as strongly as me.
That was
So we were all just like open mouth, just like.
I mean, I don't know how much I've like used Teams in life. Like, I want to say in person here and be a rebel, but I'm also going to go with Zoom because I've never heard anything good about Teams, and I think I've maybe used it a couple times, but I have never heard anything good about Teams. So I'll take what I know over what I don't.
I will also go with Zoom because, and so far it's the only tool I have worked with. I haven't worked with Teams yet, and because of your comments, guys, I think I won't do it. So let's go.
Well, see, I'm in a different boat where. Oh, sorry, I'm in the shot. I swear. Okay. That I only have used Zoom and I'm only comfortable with Zoom at the moment. However, I'm going to be having to use Teams for my research for dissertation, as it has been accepted that way in my proposal. So I better get comfortable and, exercise my computer ASAP.
I got to go with Zoom. We have at the university, and Stephanie's part of that, the only approved platform at the university is Teams. And now that's the approved platform. And the way they try to threaten faculty is to say, we will not support anything else than Teams. And it's like, well, good. I don't need any support on Zoom. I know how to use it. My students know how to use it. But from a research protocol, they want it to run through the Microsoft platform. So that's why if you're doing research and you're doing things at a distance, you have to use Teams, which is a major headache for a lot of folks. But I am Team Zoom. And unlike Elliott, I would light it on fire and let it burn to a crisp before I urinated on it. I would like no remnants of it left over whatsoever, and I'll leave my DNA all over it if I have to, just to confuse them. Well, whatever team you're on, whether it's Team Zoom or Team Teams, which is the bastion of, and they keep sending you these emails like, oh, this is so wonderful, and wouldn't you like to do this and this? No, I don't want to do it at all. Just stop. But whatever team you're on, you can join us on Circular Firing Squad. We've had a great group tonight. Thanks to Elliott and Elvis and Mitch and Stephanie for joining tonight. Make sure to check out the Tech Savvy Professor podcast hosted by Eric, who is finishing up either the dance recital season or the basketball season. I can't remember what it is, but he'll be joining us again. He's not doing the dance recitals. His daughter is. But he'll be joining us again as part of the group. and it'll be nice to have him join us. But we do a show together called The Tech Savvy Professor, and then I do a show called Vision Profiles about the Apple Vision Pro with another Eric, not the Eric here on Circular Firing Squad. Our theme music is for Menage a Quad, Real Swing Shet. Any final words, folks? Dead silence.
Eric.
What?
Oh, I was going to say, it sounds like Eric's going to have to sit through some musicals soon. That's all.
Oh, yeah, Eric's not a big fan of musicals. That's it for this episode of the Circular Firing Squad. Ready, fire, aim.